What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Cardone Corner with me, Gary Cardone from the past, but not really. This is your co-host, Samuel Arms. Peter Dunsworth is our guest today. This Gary should be hopping on, but he might be MIA. I don't know if you guys saw his Twitter, but Gary's house is right on the Gulf of Mexico. And so if you want to see like what a meteorologist's life is like, go check out Gary's Twitter. He is okay. I know a lot of people are worried about him, but he is fine. His house is built like an actual castle, right? So the house is going to be fine. I just know he's got a lot to maintain. I don't know how many of you have been to Gary's house because we always throw these like parties there about once or twice a year that are pretty fantastic. But enough about that. We have our guest, Peter Dunsworth, who is calling from Australia, correct?
Correct.
So it is midnight there?
It's pretty early in the morning, about 2 o'clock. So
2 a.m.?
Yeah.
Did you stay up this late just for us?
No chance.
No chance. So why are you awake?
I'd rather get up early than go to bed late. So yeah.
There's no way you're telling me you wake up at 2 a.m. every day?
No, usually it's about 3 to 4.
You know, you're just like my brother. I pride myself that I get up early. I get up at 5. Yeah. And he always goes, "Oh, 5's pretty late." I'm like, "Shut up. What are you talking about?" It's like, "Oh, I'm always up at 3." I'm like, "Do you just do that just so you can outdo me?" Like that's but when do you go to bed?
Early.
But like 8 p.m. early?
Maybe not that early, but the important thing, or why I've got to get up, or feel like I've got to get up, I want to watch the US markets. So US markets, it's prime time right now, right? It's midday for New York or close to it. So, I want to be as close to that action as possible because that affects the rest of the day.
So give me your brief background, because I know a little bit about you, and I know we filmed you previously with an interview with Gary. And by the way, you do not have to stay on for the full hour. I'm not going to abuse you like that, Peter. But I would love to take the opportunity to kind of get to know you myself and what you do. So go ahead, tell me.
Well, what I do now is probably a little bit different to what I've done in the past. But what I currently do is basically help people buy and secure in a self-custodied fashion Bitcoin. So we help people remove the technical problems of holding your Bitcoin. We remove any technical barrier. Typically, our clients are baby boomers with a lot of money, want to have self-control and self-custody of their Bitcoin, but want to do that in an environment that's not going to hurt themselves. And this is where our service comes in, that we haven't lost a single Satoshi. No one's lost anything. We've been through a number of deaths with clients, sadly, and we've been able to pass on those self-custody Bitcoin to their beneficiaries with no loss of failure. But the journey to Bitcoin is a pretty standard one in traditional finance. Studied accounting and finance at university, or what you call school, or college, and then moved into the funds management industry at Bankers Trust a very long time ago, 26 or 7 years ago, and then moved into the credit industry, understanding basically credit drives everything. The equity guys think that equities runs the world. It doesn't. If you look at the capital stack and or the creditor stack and who's at the top of it, it's always the debtors outrank any equity holders. So really
keep talking. Now you got my mind spent with a bunch of questions, but go ahead.
Yep. So the debt markets really run the world, and this is on perception of the financial markets. Most people think that it's the equities that run the world, but that's kind of the flashy, lights, bells and whistles, and looks really good and inviting. But the real money runs in the debt markets, and that's where the real influence of capital markets happens. So, and then went into financial advice. So making sure that clients can structure their affairs in the right manner to effectively pay the least amount of tax possible, and ensure that they're set up in structures that are going to ensure that their estates can inherit in the best way possible the assets that they've worked their lifetime to accumulate, and protect those from any creditors or family law instances that might seek to diminish that wealth.
So a quick question for you. So when you said credit runs the market or debt, right? Is that the same as saying liquidity?
Yes and no. The liquidity is a function of the debt markets.
Yeah.
And so usually when there's a crisis in the debt markets, that's because there's no liquidity. And that usually comes about, and then we see a big injection from the governments. And what we've seen, I think, over the last, really since the GFC, we've seen a leveling up of the debt up the stack. So the 2008 crisis was basically a bank problem, but we put that as a retail problem because it was mums and dads getting kicked out of their homes, not being able to afford the interest rates. That then got pushed up the stack to being a corporate problem with liquidity, because there was, basically American insurance group AIG had huge issues with liquidity, had to be bailed out. Goldman Sachs had to be bailed out. I think you're probably familiar with the famous 0% interest loan that Warren Buffett took from the US government to buy shares in Goldman Sachs to alleviate any concerns in the American financial system. Yep. And that was effectively a liquidity crunch. But what we're seeing throughout time is, as those liquidity crunches get bigger, they actually move up the stack from the personal to the corporate. And now we're at the point where the governments are going to have debt crises, and there's no one to bail them out. So everyone's ready for them to just start printing money. And I think we're at the start of that liquidity cycle again, where in the last week alone, we've seen, I think literally just yesterday, China printed 142 billion, put it into the banks for the purchase of stocks to prop up their markets. And that's just the start of it. They've lowered interest rates. We're starting to see an easing of liquidity, which means more capital is going to flow into the market. And that's really good for our favorite asset.
So before I get on the economic discussion, I want to go back to exactly what you do, just so the audience understands too. But are you, what time is it in Australia? Around 5 p.m. Eastern American time, like New York time. What time is it for you?
9 o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock.
Okay. So are you already in bed by then?
No, 9 a.m.
9 a.m. Oh, right. 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay. Duh. Have you been on one of our Twitter spaces yet?
No, I did. Gary reached out yesterday and said, come and join us. And I would have, but I was just predisposed, so I wasn't able to.
We'll get you on one of those, because I've learned from those spaces what you're talking about, where it seems liquidity runs the world. And so we were having these conversations, I think just the other day, about really what affects Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin's not tied to the stock market necessarily. Bitcoin is tied to global liquidity, right? Is what this guy Joe will say often. And then we have this other trader on called Chris Inks. His name's Chris Inks, and he'll talk about something very similar. And it's just this very interesting concept to me, because about 5 years ago, I went on my Eurodollar discovery. Like, people, it's very underrated, right? So people are like, oh, tell me about your Bitcoin journey. I'm like, Bitcoin's cool, and it is cool, but if you get, to me, understanding the Eurodollar is way harder than understanding Bitcoin. I don't know if people, like, when I say Eurodollar, still, like, most people are like, oh, euros? Like, yeah, what's that have to do with the European currency? I'm serious. But my mind still just, like, I think about at the beginning of this year, after thinking I understood Eurodollars, which, by the way, for the audience, Eurodollars, hopefully I get this correct, are just dollars outside the United States, not necessarily under the control of the United States, right? Which is a very interesting concept once you understand, okay, well, we print money, but then I learned that non-U.S. entities can issue Eurodollars. So this whole idea of global liquidity still drives me a little bit nuts, because I was listening to Jeffrey Schneider. I don't know if you've heard of him. Love Brilliant, that, man. He's based out of Palm Beach. And I remember I actually used to talk to him in college. I used to send emails back and forth when I was still like, okay, what is this stuff? And on a podcast of his, he was saying, oh, by the way, when banks are trading Eurodollar balances, there's never actually any money moving anywhere. Like, it's not like okay, well, I owe you $1,000 and I'm going to get you that $1,000. It's just like, oh, we just put it on the list. but that it doesn't really mean anything. And even talking about it, I feel so stupid because I'm just like, how does this make any sense? But it somehow works, right? Like, and so I'm starting to like, okay, so global liquidity is just like a lubricant for world economic stability, right? Like, it's just like this weird, like, it doesn't operate like we say a currency does. And that's why now maybe you as a Bitcoiner, we could have the perfect conversation. And I know this isn't necessarily probably what you thought the direction of this call was going to go. But like, I'm not sure if Bitcoin's going to replace the US dollar, but really, I'm not sure Bitcoin's going to replace the euro dollar because because Bitcoin seems like good, sound money. I don't know if the euro dollar is actually money, so that's where I kind of like my head starts like spinning until I just start going a little bit crazy. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I used to be like Bitcoin's going to take over the world camp. But I've always like been a little bit hesitant because I'm just very practical. I work in politics. I'm like, okay, how's this going to work out? Now I'm in the camp where I'm like, I think even if the US fails, the euro dollar will still be around and then Bitcoin will still be around. And somehow both of those might actually serve two completely different functions. So I just ranted. Go ahead. Give me all you got.
I personally think, and this might be not a popular opinion, but I think the US dollar and Bitcoin are in quite a symbiotic relationship. And it's not mutually exclusive to think that both can succeed, at least in the short term anyway, because I think the US dollar, and if we look at the function of what USDT and Tether does, that is effectively the most successful euro dollar that we have, with 120 billion of issuance. Yep. And it's likely that that will probably be $1 trillion of issuance in the next 5 years. So the other thing is focusing on why Bitcoin's going up. If we want Bitcoin to go to infinity, then it's reliant on having the relativity of the US dollar.
Yeah.
Because you can't have Bitcoin to infinity without being able to print infinite amount of dollars. So if you're a numbers go up kind of guy, you want to have that symbiotic relationship where the US dollar feeds off Bitcoin and Bitcoin feeds off the US dollar.
I think I agree with you. Like, I think that's where I'm at this point. So going back, the business that you operate, are you like an Unchained Capital where you're helping people custody their Bitcoin on their behalf, but they still have access to it? But you're operating under like a trust company? Because I remember you said your background was 27 years working in trust. So I assumed, I'm like, oh, this is a very natural. I can see your career be like, aha. So what he's doing right now makes complete sense. So is that kind of what you're doing now? Is you're helping people store their wealth in Bitcoin through a trust securely?
Correct. And this is where I'd like to give credit to our partners in the multi-sig space. And Unchained is a wonderful partner that we use. We also use a number of other multi-sig providers, which are outstanding. They're fundamentally, and their premise is initially a software provider. And what we do is wrap a service around those multi-sig providers to ensure that we remove every single point of failure from a client's self-custody setup. So that way they can buy Bitcoin, they can self-custody the Bitcoin, but if they haven't made the necessary provisions, or alternatively they haven't dealt with a multiple of redundancies to pass their Bitcoin if they don't wake up tomorrow, using our service along with Unchained or Thea or Castle or whoever it might be, the client doesn't have to worry about losing their Bitcoin or their estate missing out on the benefits of the Bitcoin that they've held, because we help their estate, their beneficiaries, to recover the Bitcoin in the event that they don't wake up. So it's a nuanced service that leverages off the great work that Unchained and Thea and Casa do to deliver a better customer experience to ensure that they don't lose Bitcoin.
And someone in the audience wants to know, what's the name of your company, Jeff? I mean, Peter?
The Bitcoin Advisor.
The Bitcoin Advisor. And that's just you?
No, that's about 40 advisors globally. So
wow,
we've got advisors in the US, across Europe, Asia, obviously Australia, but there's quite a few of us now.
So you're like a layer on top of the Unchained of the world, right?
Correct.
But okay.
And it acts like an insurance policy that if you're like if you're a good Bitcoiner, you go down the rabbit hole and then you want to make sure that you don't trust, you verify. And we offer a layer of insulation in the event that something were to happen to Unchained or your other multi-sig provider. And this is where our service becomes invaluable, because we've got the technical expertise that if something were to happen to Unchained, God forbid, and I don't think it would, you want to have multiple redundancies in place for the software that you're using, so that if they don't work for whatever reason, you've got multiple different software options to recreate your wallet and then move your Bitcoin if needed to another provider.
Does that have to be done before the event happens? So I used Unchained right now, for example. Do I need to sign up with you before Unchained goes out of business, or can I talk to you after and be like, hey, what do I do now?
We just need a very important piece of, and I might take a step back. One of the most critical things you can do for your self-custody setup is ensure that you have the wallet configuration file for your multi-sig, because that represents a map that helps you find your Bitcoin in the event that the software provider is not there. That's the critical piece of information that you need for the recovery of your Bitcoin in the event your software provider no longer offers service or has a breakdown or is currently in service. Who knows what that reason may be. But with that wallet configuration file, you can take that and then apply that to multiple different software vendors. And that's your redundancy, to ensure that you're not reliant on any single piece of software or any person in the process of your self-custody. And that is really critical for ensuring that you've got redundancies for every piece in your self-custody stack. So having that information ahead of time is really important, because as often happens when you actually need the information, it's impossible to get. So it's nice to have it beforehand.
Yeah, gotcha. When did you, and you said you started this business when?
We started offering advice to high net worth families based in Sydney back in 2016.
Wow. Okay.
And so it's probably been maybe 5 or 6 years now that we've been working with the likes of Unchained and Casa to offer this service. And I guess the genesis of this happened, and this is probably a good story to tell, in that as a financial advisor or investment advisor, I've got a fiduciary duty to clients, and I wanted all my clients to own some level of Bitcoin back in 2016. But the thought of giving them, helping them self-custody their Bitcoin and having say a 65 or a 70-year-old with no technical knowledge walk out the door with a little USB stick with millions of dollars of Bitcoin on it was completely inappropriate, and was just financially irresponsible for me to do that for clients. So when multi-sig came along, it offered us the opportunity and the clients the opportunity to self-custody their Bitcoin without any of the fears of losing that single device. Because there's no single point of failure, we can set the client up in a multi-sig where Unchained has a key, the client has a key, and we hold a key. They control the account, they've got full access to it, complete self-sovereignty. And if they don't wake up tomorrow, because they're only holding one of the 3 keys, with the service providers that they have, their estate can recover their Bitcoin. And that, to me, was the most important thing. If we're advising clients to self-custody their Bitcoin, I don't want to be on the hook and responsible for the clients losing millions of dollars because we haven't spent the necessary or the required 50 to 100 hours in educating them on how to look after a USB stick. So the collaborative security protocol is a much simpler and more elegant way of doing it, and allows us to get a client in and out within probably a 15-minute window.
Now, you're a great solution, but you're not for the common man, right? You have a very specific target audience, right? Like high net worth individuals.
Ideally, yes, but the advisors literally look after anyone with upwards of half a Bitcoin. So we've got solutions for that too.
And I just say that because a lot of Bitcoiners, I think, complain about self-custody. But I tell them, your average person probably shouldn't self-custody because they will lose it, right? Like there's a reason a lot of these systems exist, and we can't force our knowledge and ideology on like the mass of the population. So I think someone like you coming in essentially solves that problem. But once again, like what's going to happen when like everyone owns Bitcoin, but they only own like a couple Satoshis, right? Like that's not your client, right? Because I assume, how do you make money, Peter? I assume you, if you're an advisor, you don't make money off of the gains in Bitcoin, do you? Because it's a trust. So is there like a one-time setup fee or something, or how does that work?
No, we have an ongoing fee, percentage-based fee for helping with clients with that. And the custody and the lockdown of the security of their Bitcoin is, I guess, it's just a standard. It's a must-have. It's a minimum requirement for getting in the door and talking to clients about that. But the advice component for me is the fun part, where working with clients to figure out where there is idle Bitcoin or idle capital sitting around that's what we call lazy capital that isn't invested in the best asset possible, and talking to clients about how they can alter their asset allocation to increase their exposure to Bitcoin is part of the fun in the work we do. And I'm really proud to say that from the last batch of data that we've got, clients who've worked with us the first 12 months on average increased their stack by 51%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's an outstanding stat. So obviously
that's awesome.
we're really happy about that. And this is where I think when you have the ability to lock down the security of your Bitcoin, and you can understand and that there's no way, shape or form that you can lose your Bitcoin, that opens up the opportunity for our clients to look at other assets that they want to apply more capital to Bitcoin. And it's not so much the Bitcoiner that we service, it's typically the Bitcoiner's partner that we're helping, because the Bitcoiners all in, they're committed. They want to have all their assets in Bitcoin. That's a really simple analogy for them. That's what they want to do. But typically the thing holding them back is the responsibility that they have to their partner and their family. And they're not 100% confident that their partners would be able to recover the Bitcoin if something were to happen. Alternatively, the partner might turn around and say, I don't want any more capital allocated here because I don't know what I'm doing here and I don't want to lose it. But if you can lock that down and you've got a system and a process in place that ensures that regardless of what happens to you or the partner, that the estate, the children, the beneficiaries are going to recover the Bitcoin, then that opens up the window and the opportunity to buy more Bitcoin.
What are you what else can you do? So for example, Unchained was originally a solution to just do multi-sig. But now they're like, hey, we're custodying people's Bitcoins. You can take out a loan on your Bitcoin. Can you guys, but you guys can't do that, right? Because you're not actually holding it. So are you just one service, or do you actually see yourself branching off into other products, so to speak?
I can tell you now, we will not be a financial services company. We have no desire to do that.
Yep.
We will not be offering loans. We will not be offering any form of financial advice around that. And we have a very simple business model that we're effectively a disaster recovery business that looks like a financial services business. So all we offer is the ability to recover your Bitcoin. And when you have that locked down, that then gives you the confidence to go and buy more Bitcoin. Having said that, I'm really thrilled that there are services like Unchained out there that offer the loans in this marketplace, because what we're going to see is the sophistication of the Bitcoin market, where more and more of the traditional services that we're used to in the financial markets are going to come to the Bitcoin platform. Now, one such product that I'm really excited about that will come to market, I think, is an annuity style product that is going to pay you an income for putting your Bitcoin into there's Gaz.
You can keep going. You can keep going. Gary, I know he's watching, so you can say hi to Gary, Peter. He just doesn't have Wi-Fi, but he is alive, everybody. He is alive.
Hope he's okay. Yeah. So what we're going to see is more and more of these traditional financial products built out on Bitcoin. And one product that I'm really excited about coming to town is the annuities style product, which is going to pay you a set income, and you're going to put your Bitcoin up as security in a tax advantaged environment, and you'll be able to live off your Bitcoin in the form of payments ongoing. So all these products are coming to town. I think the big news in the last week is BNY Mellon, the first bank to offer custody of Bitcoin. Now, all of a sudden they're going to be in the market for offering loans on Bitcoin in a minute, and then they'll be wrapping annuity style products into it as well. So it feels like we're at the dawn of an explosion in these financial services merging with traditional financial services merging with Bitcoin.
That's why I feel like the perfect strategy, I know everyone has a selling point, but I really don't understand why I would ever sell my Bitcoin when I think it could be such a valuable asset. I'm just going to be able to just earn income from letting people hold it or just taking loans out on it. Like it's like I'm buying real estate. And the goal, what a lot of people do is they just buy the real estate to then take out loans to buy more real estate. Right.
That's fundamentally, well, I look at Bitcoin as the greatest
should I do that with
Earth.
my Bitcoin though? Should I take out a loan on my Bitcoin and then use that loan to buy more Bitcoin? Like, do you think right now the interest rates are what, 12 to 15%? I think they're crazy, but is there a future in that world? I don't know.
The future I envisage, which looks on the surface to be completely crazy and unhinged, but let's just discuss this and see how this evolves. I think with the advent of Bitcoin being custodied by the banks, that opens up a completely different realm and possibility for what this asset can do. It's my firm belief that Bitcoin will be it's my firm belief that Bitcoin is the greatest form of collateral ever invented. It is far superior to any of the real estate assets as far as collateral goes. The big thing with Bitcoin and the key innovation here is that Bitcoin is the first globally ubiquitous asset or collateral. And by that, I mean, you're living in the US, I'm living in Sydney. You can't take your Florida title deed to your property and bring it to an Australian bank and say, hey, I want to borrow money.
Yeah.
Now, and vice versa, I can't take my title deed and come to a US bank and say, hey, I've got a beautiful property in Sydney. It's lovely, blah, 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 give me money. They'll laugh me out of the bank and say, see you later. We don't do loans in Australia. Now, if I've got Bitcoin, I can go to a US bank and say, hey, I've got Bitcoin. And they're like, oh, we accept that collateral. Yeah, we want some of that. We want that on our balance sheet. And so I can custody that with a US bank. Vice versa, that when our banks are going to custody, you can bring your Bitcoin to Australia to custody it here. That's the first layer of this. The second layer of this is that this allows Bitcoiners around the globe to take advantage of the best interest rates globally. So you and I living in Australia and the US, your interest rates are at circa 5%. Our interest rates, are about 4 point something. That's expensive relative to Japan, which is sitting at 0.25. So we could take our Bitcoin, and because it's globally ubiquitous, the same everywhere on Earth, if we want to borrow on it, we're not going to borrow from an Australian bank or a US bank. We're going to take it to a Japanese bank who's offering interest rates at 1 to 2%. So we can literally send that money there instantly and then borrow at 1 to 2% as opposed to a 7 or 8% handle from a bank in America or Australia.
Isn't this just a new arbitrage opportunity?
Correct.
But that's like going to be far simpler and far more legally safe than like ever before. Yeah, because to your point, I'll go to Japan, get a 0.5% loan, and then say, okay, I could either use that to buy more Bitcoin, or I could do something to where I give other people my Bitcoin for yield that's going to be, 5 to 10%. And I know there's always the underlying collateral risk. Like I know nothing's perfect, right? So I know there's some caveats in that somewhere, somehow. But off the top of my head, I'm like, oh, that is interesting. Because to your point, and I guess I never really thought about this, there is no world ubiquitous asset.
None. There's gold,
real estate
but it's
doesn't count.
Real estate doesn't count. The closest we have, the closest we have to global collateral is the US dollar, because it's the one of only 3 instruments that's paired with every currency on Earth. If you look at that, one of the 3 instruments that are paired with every currency, the US dollar, because it's a global reserve currency, gold, the physical gold itself, and Bitcoin. They're your 3 options for globally ubiquitous assets. So I look at this and think that's the first layer of this stack. All of a sudden, anyone with Bitcoin gets to conduct the yen carry trade on a personal level. If you look at that from a banking perspective, where it gets really interesting is under the Basel III Accords and the Basel IV Accords that are about to come in, which is the banking regulations that state how capital is to be managed and how much what your reserve ratios need to be in order to lend out capital from the global systemic banks or globally important banks.
Aren't they like zero right now, or is that just in the US? Or it's like very, very low?
It's not zero, but it's the US.
It might as well be zero, right?
It's not zero, but the US banks are operating on zero.
Yeah. Okay. But this is for the world. The Basel Accords you're talking about, this is for the world. Okay.
This is the US just says, "Hey, we're the biggest, so we're going to do whatever we feel like."
Okay. Cool. I'm glad. Yeah. Good job. Love living here. Love living in the US. That's awesome. Okay. Good.
It's great if you're American. So, and to be fair, we leverage off the good graces of the US. So I'm happy to see you guys. You do you. And for everyone sort of upset about the lay of the land, the rest of the world's worse. So as bad as that sounds, the rest of the world's worse. Yeah. And what's really interesting is when you think about these capital adequacy ratios that are required to lend money, typically $1 on the balance sheet allows you to lend out $20. And so my expectation in the near future, in less than 10 years, is that you're going to borrow money from the bank and they are going to pay you to borrow money.
They're going to pay me to borrow money, but only if it's Bitcoin.
Correct. Because what they're going to do is, say Bitcoin's sitting at 10 million bucks a coin. You're going to deposit that Bitcoin in the bank. They're going to be able to use that $10 million of Bitcoin, and they're going to be able to lend out $200 million worth of lending on the back of it. If they're making a 2% spread on that $200 million, they're profiting to the tune of $4 million. Now they'll turn around and say, because we need capital, we're going to pay you to borrow money from us. And that sounds like such an outrageous idea, but now that we've got a global competition for capital, there are going to be one bank on earth who's going to say, we will pay you to borrow money from us. And then it comes down to risk management. Is that a suitable institution for you to be borrowing from?
Everyone thought negative interest rates sounded stupid until they happened.
And then they did.
And they happened for quite some time, did they not? Over 2-3 years?
They did. They managed to issue 17 trillion of effectively negative yielding rates.
Wow.
The other thing, and this is where, if we think about that, it's directionally happening already. If you look at how Unchained operates, Unchained's interest rates are sitting at circa 12 to 16% because they're not rehypothecating your Bitcoin. If you look at other lenders in the marketplace, if you borrow less than 15% of the Bitcoin that you put up as collateral, you can have a 0% interest rate. Now, that institution isn't allowed to leverage your Bitcoin 20x for further lending and profit on that. So what happens when a bank has the ability to do it? I can tell you directionally that is already happening. So the idea that you're not going to get paid to borrow money or borrow US dollars on your Bitcoin, I think is, I'll have an argument with anyone on that, and I can show you now what's happening.
So I got 2 comments. First comment, it's great that you know this, but it's only useful when banks start noticing it, right? How far away are we from that? I mean, I know we have the BNY Mellon news, but like, are there Peters talking to these banks, or are the banks just understanding it naturally? Like, and are they like, because banks are very interesting in the sense that, not that they're the best institutions in the world, but they're like the Jamie Dimons, right? Where I think they always have known how useful Bitcoin will be, but they've been shit talking it for some time, but then they switch on a dime. So they're just very secretive. They don't want anybody knowing what their plans or goals are for a good 5 years sometimes. So, I mean, realistically, I think I would agree with you that this kind of stuff will happen, but when? Right? What's that waking up period?
I think it's going to be a 5-year period. Like,
that seems quick. That seems really soon. Like, sooner than I would expect.
I think it's definitely less than 7 years. And if you think about that, that's by 2030.
Okay.
We're nearly in 2025. So we're 5 years away from 2030, or 3 months, 3 months or 5 years and 3 months from 2030. I look at that and think that's not unrealistic, but there are sort of things that need to fall in place before that happens. One of those things being the bank needs to be able to custody Bitcoin. And this is where the announcement with BNY Mellon this week is enormous news. The other enormous news we had was the options trading that are now allowed on the ETFs. That's a huge deal. But the insignificance, or why I think in the short term the whole trading options on IBIT won't amount to a huge material gain in the immediate future, is because those options markets take years to build out. So we won't see an immediate pump on the back of it, but over the next 5 years, that will probably be the most significant thing that's happened in Bitcoin, other than the ETF launching.
Very interesting. My second comment is, having gotten to know Gary and his Node 40 company, how much do you know about Node 40? A little bit or a lot of it?
Yeah, I know a little bit about it. It's going to be an incredibly valuable company one day.
Doesn't everything we're talking about, so for the audience, like, I didn't even, like, my background's in economics and politics and finance. We never talked about cost basis, right? And so when it finally clicked, I've been working with Gary now since March, and Node 40 and what it really does clicked with me about 2 months ago. And I was like, oh, like, I've been buying Bitcoin for such and such amount of time. I've never sold it. But it's like, how do you know what that's really worth? Like, what is your cost base? And the first part of me is like, okay, well, who cares? And then we start having these conversations and like, well, the bank's going to want to know, which Bitcoin are you giving me? Right? Are you giving me the $10,000 Bitcoin or the $100,000 Bitcoin? Right? And then which one do you want to loan out? Right? And which one do you want to sell? Yeah, I was just like, holy cow. And so all of these, as what you're talking about gets built out, they have to know what the cost basis of all this stuff is. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Like, I was like, oh, this is literally a product for the plumbing of the entire future financial system, if we believe what's about to happen with Bitcoin's about to happen.
Yeah. And this is where I think, beyond just being a center for cost basis, from my understanding, Node 40 and what's just the critical piece from an ongoing management perspective will be the risk management tools that are associated with that. And that is going to be absolutely critical, where our traditional banking system is mark to market on a daily basis, maybe in some capacity minute to minute, but realistically it's squared off every day. Whereas Node 40, from my understanding, is going to give you risk mitigation tools to the second. And that is going to be insanely important in a 24/7, 365 market. The existing banking system shuts down for about 36 to 40 hours a week. By the time we have a close in New York and Japan opens first thing on Monday morning, it's about a 36 to 40 hour window, depending on what time of year we're in. And so every week, the banking sector gets a reset and can sort of get their ducks in a row. But once Bitcoin and other alternative digital assets are custodied on the banking system platform, those systems need to be absolutely squeaky clean, perfect, 24/7, 365. And this is where the oversight and the integration that Node 40 offers as a risk mitigation tool, oh boy, I haven't seen anything that comes close to that.
Question for you, and once again, because a lot of these concepts are still new to me, do you need to know your cost basis for your clients' Bitcoin when you're talking about trust?
Yeah, you do.
Why?
It's not a critical function, but it's a nice to have. Now,
like, when when a client dies, do you need to know and pass that information on, like the cost basis, to the children? Like, it's just a form of auditing and record keeping, because then when they do sell it, it's going to be like, hey, this is important information.
Correct. And this is where they want to get that right, because making sure that you've got the best information from a recording perspective is critical, because that then is upstream of what the taxation outcomes are going to be. And if you don't have great records around that, you could effectively penalize yourself with overpaying your tax bill.
So that was, you beat my next question. My next question was going to be, what happens if you don't know the cost basis?
You probably write it to zero. You write the cost basis to zero, so you pay tax on the full amount.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Especially, and the reason I say that's crazy is, like, I believe Bitcoin will go to 250 in the next 2 years. I have zero basis for that. I'm not a trader. I go by my gut feeling, which is why I always buy at the wrong times. But I never sell, so it doesn't matter. I'm the world's worst trader. So take that advice as you will. I bought Bitcoin a month ago, and I was like, you guys are welcome, because every time I buy, the price dips. And then the price dipped. Literally, like, the next 4 days, it probably went like $3,000 cheaper. So you guys are welcome for that.
Spoken like a true Bitcoiner.
Like a true Bitcoiner, right? I always tell people, trading, like, you got to learn to never be happy, because you're never going to buy the bottom. You're never going to sell the high. Just be grateful for what you got, right? But so, you think it's going to be at zero. So if Bitcoin's at 250 and I go to sell, I'm taxed, but it really is taxes. I mean, I also think even though we say it's just taxes, I also just think of the vein of, well, could also keep you out of jail, right? If we're talking about audit and risk management, or fines or fees. Like, we think of taxes, but I also think of fines, right? And they can kind of be viewed as the same, to be completely honest, right? Like, what are taxes but a fine for living where you are, right? But I'm like, okay, because I'm always trying to think of the, I don't want to say the fear angle, but there's always like the why. Like, oh, okay, cool, I don't have to pay as much in taxes. But then it's like, okay, well, actually, like, when you understand the tax code and tax system, there's a lot more intricacies to then just making sure you pay your taxes accurately. Like, it's also, well, this is how you stay out of trouble, right?
Correct. And I think your messaging and Gary's messaging around this is critical. A lot of the Bitcoin community thinks, oh, it's a sovereign asset, I don't need to declare anything, and everything's going to be okay. It's like, good luck with that. Like,
well,
the IRS is ruthless when it comes to getting what's theirs. And if you're not paying enough, they will hunt you down and they'll put you in jail if you haven't done that. And this is where that tool is really critical for making sure that you don't overpay. And there's a really big stick in America for non-compliance to that tax code. And personally, I do not want to muck around with that at all. I run a licensed business in Australia. We hold an Australian financial services license. That's given to us by the good graces of ASIC, the SEC equivalent in Australia. And when you start muddying the waters and starting to cut corners on taxes and the rest of it, and being too cute for what? It doesn't make any sense, and it's not smart business to do that. Just pay your taxes, move on.
So I work in, I don't know if you know too much about my background, but so I work in politics. And so I started one of the first lobbying associations on the state level for Bitcoin. And when I first was getting started, I was like, hey, Bitcoiners, you got to talk to government. I'd get hate all the time. All the time. Why would you talk to government? Why would you talk to government at all? Like, we don't need government. And it turns out, like, you kind of do, right? And there's still, I think it's definitely become a minority now, but there's still kind of that anarchist attitude within Bitcoin that is there. But it's also hilarious because those same people love number go up, right? And they love the adoption, and they love that they were right and that their assets becoming more valuable. And so I'm here to be like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? Like, your adoption and you being right is coming at the expense of, well, now you're holding a valuable asset that every government will want and know about, right? Like, if we're just talking that banks will pay you for this and it's a limited asset, you don't think governments are going to want to know who the big Bitcoin holders are, right? Not to target and take it from you, but just almost like, hey, your car warranty's due, right? Like, you're going to be getting calls, hey, can we make an offer on the Bitcoin that you own? Right?
It's a national security issue. That's what it will come down to. In the future, it will be a national security issue. And this is where I'm personally, I'm torn because I love the cypherpunks and the self-sovereign individuals who make up this space who don't think the government has any right in this place. I kind of straddle those two those 2 points of view, and I think both play an integral part in the adoption of Bitcoin. We wouldn't be here without the cypherpunks and the self-sovereign attitude. And this is where, to me, one of my guiding principles in life is you do you. For me personally, I'm far more comfortable being having the supposition of being a good citizen and playing by the rules. And to me, I just don't need the heat. It's not worth the juice ain't worth the squeeze when it comes to fighting that front.
That's your oh man, what's the term? Not risk assessment. Whatever you call it on your threshold of risk tolerance. And now I'm blanking out on it, but
it'll come back to you.
Yeah, risk aversion really, or whatever. But yeah.
And this is where I've got a lot of very close friends who are in that space who feel quite strongly that the government has no place here, and I have nothing but respect for their opinion in that. And if that's how they want to conduct their affairs, then power to them. I have a different view because I've got a different lived experience and understand maybe that there are some things that they can do that make it very difficult for you to carry on in a certain way. So I also think there's a big misunderstanding in the broader community of Bitcoin that don't really comprehend that our legal system, and I say our legal system, Western democracies, the US, Australia, Europe, set up a whole host of provisions for the protection of your assets. And Bitcoin being an asset can fall under that. And actually, the system has provisions to help you, not hinder you, if you know what those are. And this is what I find really amusing, is that Bitcoin was developed, and a lot of early Bitcoiners are here because of the, F the man mentality. And what they don't realize is if you're holding Bitcoin, if it's not now, it will be in the very near future that you are the man. And so,
very well said. Very well said. Because I find the mentality to be true. Oh, Gary's texting me. Gary, let me make sure you're alive. Is he alive? Okay, good. He just sent me an update. Oh man. Right. Yeah, there's docks next to his house that are just completely flipped over, but he's okay and he's alive. So that's all that matters. It's the typical, if I had $1 million, I'd do it different. I'm like, well, you don't have $1 million. And if you did have $1 million, you probably would not do it differently. Right. And I noticed that very early on. I know people who got very wealthy off the 2017 run to 20K. Mm-hmm. And all the anarchist talking points they had slowly faded away when they traded it for fiat and started buying really nice cars, really nice houses, and living really nice lives. Suddenly that go get the government mindset just slowly faded away. And that's real life, right? I'm not saying that to be provocative, but I've seen it in person. That's human nature. And that's okay. That's okay if they want to do that. But there is, I think, I do think, even when you were talking about like Bitcoin being a sought after asset, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, what about the people who don't have it?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a shift in class, not the end of class, in my opinion. I don't view anything in this world as necessarily a huge equalizer. I just think it shifts the way society is structured at a time. But I digress, right? I don't want to philosophize too much, but I've kept you for 50 minutes. Peter, do you want to just, do you have any closing notes? I'll let you go. I'll probably stay on a little bit and just cover some of the hurricane stuff, which you don't have to be a part of, and try to, probably go over to Gary's house, make sure he's okay and doesn't need anything. But do you have any comments or words, or, where people can find you if they want to reach out and learn more about your services? Feel free to plug them.
Really appreciate it. It's been great chatting. If you or any of the listeners have any questions, you can reach us at www.thebitcoinadvisor.com, and that's advisor with an ER. I'm on Twitter or X at PeterBTC Advisor with an ER. if you want to reach out and DM me any questions. And most importantly, I just hope Gary's okay. Miss him, say hello for me. And if there's anything he needs, please let him know to reach out. So,
and we'll have you back on. We'll have you back on so you can talk with him and not the fake version of Gary. That'll be more.
Well, it's been great. I've really appreciated it, and big fan of your channel too. So I appreciate you having me on. It's been great to spend some time with you, and look forward to catching up in real life.
And you got to come back to America. I know you're busy, but you know our door's always open for when you choose to come this way.
I appreciate it. Look forward to it.
All right, Peter. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers, guys.
All right, guys. So I'm going to just briefly go over some of the hurricane news, but then kind of as you saw, Gary is alive. If you haven't checked his Twitter, and I can share some of my screens just so you can see kind of what Gary's been going through. It's actually been crazy, but just FYI, let's see what's going on here. Yeah, Fort DeSoto floating dock. So let me show you guys. We are okay, by the way. Let me go through some of y'all's comments, by the way. John Clad Van Dam. You are hilarious, by the way, dude. I'm always happy when you come on. Thanks for being so kind to Gary and I always see your comments. Racer X, you're probably not here anymore, but appreciate your kind words. BTC and Forex. Yeah, Gary's not here, but, you know, part of being a homeowner, which he always talks about, is you got to take care of the home. And that's exactly what he's doing right now because Gary lives right on the Gulf. Beautiful scenery. And actually, can't really see it out my window right now, but it's always beautiful after a hurricane. As terrible as that sounds, like minus the destruction and loss of life and all that bad stuff, a hurricane sucks all the moisture out of Florida, which is known for being humid, and there's no clouds or anything. There's just a breeze. It's dry and it's sunny. So that's always a bright spot for those of you who haven't experienced a Florida hurricane. Fibaswamy, I didn't know you were an anarchist. Aren't you a trader though too? So as long as you're reporting your taxes and you're trading, that's all that matters. Don't group me in that group. Been on the anarchist for 30 years. Not going to be fazed by consumerism. I hope not. But you know, everyone's got a selling point, right? I hear all the time. But it's right, by consumerism. I am, you know, good for you because I have the same opinion of consumerism that you do. No, Fibaswamy, government is mind control to me, but is needed for most. I've not needed a babysitter for 40 years or more. I'm not buying in stuff I don't need. I'm very practical. I mean, it's definitely an opinion. I might agree with some of that notion, but not necessarily all of it. So let me screen share for those that are still here hanging out. All right, so I'll just do this for just a couple minutes, guys. Here we go. All right, what are we looking at here? Let me go to this guy. There we go. So now I'm small.
Moved. Unbelievable, man. I live right over there. You guys see me posting stuff. Well, 1 mile.
You see how blue the sky is?
Fort DeSoto. And these are very heavy piers, okay? And look at this thing. It's unbelievable.
That's wild.
Wow, see what happened? So it's literally
shifted off the pillar. That's crazy. And just so you guys saw some of the stuff, so that's what just hit Florida. It could have been a lot worse. You can check that out, like right here. Like we didn't even get hit on the worst part, right? Like the panhandle right above us got hit way worse. So, you know, guys, we're right here in case you didn't know that. And then let's see. Yeah, this was him at nighttime. The problem is now with hurricanes, just FYI, water keeps rising even after the fact. So I know some friends who I've got to go help after this live stream. Their houses are flooding even more, like the water's still rising. And that's never a good thing. What's up, A1? I'm in Southwest Florida and it's really nice outside. Yep, just south of Gary, about an hour and a half. Yep, you must be in Fort Myers, Cape Coral area, which is a beautiful part of Florida. I love that area. Yeah, geez. See, look.
Off, you guys.
This is what Gary had to deal with yesterday. Oh, wow.
You guys in the loop. To I don't know, whatever age. I'm kind of over the old age thing, but redhead. Off, you guys.
All right, let's check this out. Wow.
Tell my kids I really love them. I know they thought I was not cool, but I gave my life up for the freedom and the knowledge of Helene. You know, I had a feeling this girl was going to be a badass. Just the name alone, Helene. I'm thinking 42. I don't know. Whatever age. I'm kind of over the old age thing, but
yeah. So obviously we're doing. It could be worse, right?
Oh, see,
this is neighborhood. Wow. See, look at the flooding. Wow. My car could not fit through there.
Oh, these guys probably got hammered.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh my God. I can't even go any further.
Holy cow.
Dangerous for me to be going any further. I'm going to abandon the mission, ladies and gentlemen. This is dangerous.
Wow. But, you know, that was last night. So he is safe. He is safe now. Okay. So, guys, I appreciate you attending the live stream. Seriously, you guys are awesome. Once again, sorry Gary's not here, but we kind of just had a hurricane. And we're very thankful, right? Like, there's a lot of work and cleanup to do, but it could have been a lot worse. And, you know, I posted on Twitter, one of the reasons I think probably Floridians are so nice is during events like this, everyone like checks in on each other. And I, you know, was helping some of my neighbors, and like I got to meet like 10 of my neighbors who I haven't talked to before. So, you know, make sure you guys are building community because in times like this, it's really useful. And you shouldn't need a hurricane as an excuse to do it. But if you do, that's perfect, right? Get to know who actually lives around you. It's some of the most important stuff that you can be doing. It's pointless to own Bitcoin if you don't have friends, in my opinion. So, guys, it's been good. You will see us Monday live at noon. Have a good weekend. Stay safe and do something nice for somebody. Peace out.